मरघट तक है तेरी कहानी पग पग प्यारे दंगल 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 सूरज तेरा चढ़ता ढलता गर्दिश में करते हैं तारे दंगल 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 दंगल.
Great morning, my dear friends. Bhupesh Anand again. So today we will be discussing with the most important part of this fixed income securities defining elements reading. That is lecture number 3, and learning outcome number D. We will be starting with that. What are the legal and regulatory framework and taxation framework which affect issue and trading of fixed income securities? So please take out the registers. Before that, I have written a quotation: no defeat is final until you stop trying. It means no defeat is final. Fixed income securities defining elements. We are doing this reading, lecture number 3, and today we will be starting with learning outcome number D. And the name of that learning outcome number D is describe how legal, regulatory and tax considerations. Legal, regulatory and tax considerations affect the issuance and trading of fixed income securities. Because fixed income securities, one person is borrowing and other person is lending. So, and there is a contract between these two, which is represented by bond indenture, and there are clauses in that which are named as convenients. No, because there is a fund involved in that. As in case of in case of shares, we generally issue a prospectus. A company generally issues a prospectus. So similarly, in case of debentures, in case of bonds, in case of fixed income securities, a company generally issues bond indenture. Now we have discussed in lecture number 2 that what is the meaning of a bond indenture. So today I will be putting the emphasis on what are the legal and regulatory framework considerations. Regulatory frameworks which can affect the issue and the trading of the fixed income. So there are 3 parts in this learning outcome. First is legal, then is regulatory, and third is tax considerations. So in today's lecture, I will be focusing towards legal and regulatory considerations. That how these legal and regulatory considerations can affect the issuance and trading of fixed income securities. No, when I say how this legal and regulatory framework can affect the issuance and trading, so I can divide into 4 parts. It is on the basis of 4 scenarios I can discuss legal and regulatory framework. Tax considerations I will be discussing in lecture number 4. In lecture number 3, I will be doing with these legal and regulatory frameworks. And when I say legal and regulatory frameworks, now it depends upon different factors. There are 4 scenarios which I have given to you. So please write down first point: bonds are subject to different legal and regulatory requirements depending upon. Now it depends upon 4 scenarios. That what is the place in which you are issuing, and where it can be traded. It means first scenario is place where they are issued and traded. Second scenario is who is the issuing entity, whether it is a sovereign bond, whether it is a government bond, which entity is issuing it. And the third scenario is what are the sources of repayment. So we are discussing that what are those 4, how this legal and regulatory considerations can affect. So it depends upon 4 scenarios. And the last is how much is the credit enhancement. So it depends upon these 4 points. In today's lecture, I will be doing with place where they are issued and traded. I will be doing with issuing entities, and I will be discussing with sources of repayment. But the 4th scenario, that is credit enhancement and tax considerations, I will be discussing in lecture number 4. Now let me tell you, my dear friends, in point number 2, I have firstly discussed scenario 1, that is a place of issue and trade. It means legal and regulatory framework depends upon the place where you are issuing those bonds. Whether those are being issued in India, whether those are being issued in London, whether those are being issued in Pakistan, which entity is issuing, which is the currency in which they are issuing, all these points, and in which country they are can be traded. So legal and regulatory framework depending upon the place where they are issued and traded, it depends upon that. So I have, in point number 2, I have bifurcated the bonds of 3 types. One is domestic bond, second is foreign bond, and third is euro bonds. So once we are aware that which type of bond which is, we can have an idea of taxation and that legal and regulatory framework. So there are 3 types of bonds which I will be discussing with. First is domestic bonds. It means Apollo Tires in India is issuing bonds in Indian rupees and can only be traded in India. I will say it is a domestic bond. Or I will say McDonald's is issuing bond in USD in USA, can be traded in USA markets. It is a domestic bond. Or Microsoft is issuing bonds in USA, can be traded in USA and in denominated in USD dollars. It is named as a domestic bond. Very simple. So please write down what is the meaning of bond. Domestic bonds: bonds issued and traded in the issuer's home currency. McDonald's home currency is USD, and country and currency is the home. So these are named as domestic bonds. Please write an example of McDonald's, Apollo Tires, Microsoft, and the next point is foreign bonds. It means now there is a difference as compared to domestic bonds. When a company, for example, a Reliance Industry is an Indian company. Now this Reliance Industry is issuing bonds, is raising funds from USA markets, and these bonds are issued in USD. In USD. Now, I will say these types of bonds are named as foreign bonds for the Indian company. So just write down bonds issued by foreign issuers. Reliance Industry is a foreign issuer for USA point of view, but denominated in the currency of the country where they are traded. Now these bonds can only be traded in USA. So they are denominated in USD. They are issued in USD. So these types of bonds are named as foreign bonds. So it means legal and regulatory framework depends upon the place where they are issued and the place where they are traded. And the last category is euro bonds, where there are no bindings. A company issuing a bond in a different currency, and it is being traded in a different country where there is no where for example McDonald's is issuing bonds in GBP, in Great Britain pound, and are being traded in Pakistan. I will say there is no restriction of currency and country. That is named as Eurobond. So just write down Eurobond. What is the meaning of Eurobond? If bonds are issued outside the jurisdiction of single country, it means they are just like bearer bonds. They are just like bearer bonds. You might have heard in James Bond movies that it is a negotiable instrument. Once I have transferred the document, it means I have transferred that bond. Just like Indira Vikas Patra you have seen in India. Long time back, we have Indira Vikas Patra, Kisan Vikas Patra. Those are just like bearer bonds. So Euro bonds issued outside the jurisdiction of any single country and denominated in a country other than in a currency other than that of country in which bonds are traded. So I have given an example. Euro bonds are just like bearer bonds. They are the negotiable instruments, and bonds issued in USD by McDonald's and traded in Tokyo or traded in India or traded in anywhere, multiple countries, that is named as Eurobond. So I have covered, we are discussing a learning outcome number D, that how legal and regulatory frameworks, how tax frameworks, how tax considerations can affect the issue and trading of fixed income securities. Within that, there are 4 scenarios, which is a place of issuing issue and trading. Second is which is the issuing authority. Third is what are the sources of repayment, and the fourth is credit enhancement. So I am on second scenario, that how legal and regulatory frameworks can affect by the issuing authority. So please write on point number 3, legal and regulatory requirements on the basis of issuing entities, that who is issuing that bond. Who is issuing that bond, whether the government is issuing that bond, whether the agency is issuing that bond, whether the corporation is issuing that bond, or whether it is a case of special purpose entity, SPE. So this point is very important, that if these bonds are issued by SPE, so I will be discussing the whole process, that if these bonds are issued by SPE, then it will have a different legal and regulatory framework. So we are discussing if they are being issued by government or by agency or by corporation or by this or by special purpose entity, we will have a different legal and tax. We will have a different legal and regulatory frameworks. Even the tax considerations will be different. Now, before that, I just want to tell you what is the meaning of SPE, or how the bonds are being issued by mortgage secured bonds are being issued by SPE. So for that, I just want to tell you a working of SPE. If supposingly Mr. X wants to borrow something, or an institution wants to borrow something, so first point in USA is that they check the credit quality of that borrower, that how much is the credit quality of that borrower, whether the quality is good or poor. Because if it is good, then he can borrow from agency. There are three types of agencies in USA. If there is a good quality, then it can be borrowed from agency, and agency charges a relatively cheaper rate of interest as compared to banks or as compared to non-banking financial companies. So there are three sources from where a borrower can borrow: agency, second is banks, and third is NBFCs. Now it depends upon the credit quality, that how much is the credit quality. If credit quality is best, good, then he can firstly rely on that. He will be getting the loan from agency. And if the credit quality is not as good as they require, then they can borrow from banks. But banks will generally charge a higher interest rate. If the credit quality is worse, then they can borrow from NBFC, and the rate of interest will be still higher than banks. So you're getting a point. So in USA, the market, these types of borrowing, these types of mortgage-backed securities, they have a very good framework. So first point is they will find out the credit quality of that borrower. And once that, supposedly the credit quality is good, then they will borrow it from the agency. There are three big agencies in USA. I will be showing you with the help of Google Baba that which type of those agencies are there. Now, agency will lend the money to these borrowers. Now, this will be treated as a loan, as an asset for this agency, and it will appear in the balance sheet asset side of this agency. Now, this agency will transfer this asset to a special entity that is named as special purpose entity. Will transfer these assets to SPE, and this SPE will sell these assets in small parts to retail and institutional investors. So this is the basic working of SPE. I will be showing you with the help of flowchart, but before that, just please write on B point, process of working of mortgage markets in USA. Process of working of mortgage markets in USA. Step 1 is the credit quality of the borrower is judged. That what is the credit quality of the borrower? Step 2 is on the basis of credit quality, preference of issuing entity may be given, and I have just told you there are three preferences. First, in USA, we can borrow it from agency because the rate of interest is very lower as compared to banks and non-banking financial companies. Step number 3 will be, if the borrower has a good credit quality, then they can borrow from the agency. And now I have prepared a graph, a flow chart. First step is, we will be checking the quality of this borrower. Supposing the quality is good, then he is getting the loan from agency, and this loan will be asset for agency. Now this loan is asset for agency, and this loan or these assets will be transferred to special purpose entity. Special purpose entity, and this special purpose entity will sell these assets in small parts to retail and institutional investors. So the point is, we are on the point that how legal and regulatory considerations can affect the issuance and trading of fixed income. So we have discussed the place of issue, the place of trading. Second is that who is the issuing authority, whether the government is the issuing authority, whether the corporations are the issuing authority, or whether these bonds are being issued by special purpose entities named as mortgaged backed securities. So I am now moving to next point, the third point, that legal and regulatory requirements on the basis of source of repayment. That what is the source of repayment? For that I will be dividing the bonds into three parts. Whether these bonds are being issued by government named as sovereign bonds. If it is a case of sovereign bonds, it means they are being issued by central government, and if they are being issued by central government, the most important point of repayment is tax revenues which they are collecting. It means the source of repayment by government of that country will be the tax amount which they are collecting. You're getting a point? For example, Indian government has issued bonds. Now, what will be the source of that repayment of those bonds? The source of repayment of that bonds will be the amount of tax collected by the Indian government. So the fourth point, legal and regulatory requirements on the basis of sources of repayment. So first is sovereign bonds. The first is sovereign bonds are typically repaid by tax receipts of the issuing country, and would be funded by tax revenues with Indian government. In the example I have given, that supposingly the bonds are issued by Indian government and those are to be repaid, then that will be funded with the help of the tax revenues with Indian government receives, which Indian government receives. Non-sovereign bonds. These are government bonds, but they are not being issued by central government. For example, municipal corporation. In USA, there is a huge, organized market of municipal bonds being issued by municipal corporation. Now, in case of non-sovereign bonds, the source of repayment can be two, either with the taxing authority, or with the revenue from that project, because generally these municipal corporations, they raise bonds, they raise the funds by issuing bonds, and they want to do a project. For example, a toll bridge is there. For example, highways, National Highways Authority of India. So bonds issued by these types of corporations are named as non-sovereign bonds, and there are two sources. One source is taxing authority, and the second is the revenue from that project. So please write on B point, non-sovereign bonds, those bonds which are government bonds, but not of central government. Bonds issued by municipal corporation. Sources of repayment. Now there are two sources of repayment. One is taxing authority and second is revenue from that project. One is taxing authority and second is revenue from that project. So taxing authority means tax received by local municipal corporation, and revenue from that project means toll collected from the toll bridge, or from that highway, or bonds issued by National Highway Authority of India, that some toll is collected from by using that road. So that can be a revenue for non-sovereign bonds. So I am to last point in case of corporate bonds. Now, corporate bonds can be bifurcated into two parts, whether they are secured or whether they are unsecured. Because if they are secured, then they are secured against a specific asset. And if they are unsecured, it means they have an overall claim, not against a specific asset. Now, if they are secured by a specific asset, which we have just discussed, that the bonds issued by the special purpose entity, then what is the source of the bonds issued by a special purpose entity? How that will be repaid? Borrower has borrowed the funds from agency. Agency has transferred the loan to the SPE. SPE has sold those assets to the investors. Now the point is, borrower will be repaying the interest part. Borrower will be repaying the principal part, and sometimes borrower will be prepaying. So that interest, that principal and that prepayment will be transferred to SPE, and from that those bonds will be repaid. So I have prepared again a flow chart for you. Borrower, agency, SPE. SPE sold those assets, and then how that repayment will be done with the help of that interest which are being paid by borrowers, or the principal which is being paid by borrowers, that will be transferred to SPE, and that will be a source. And then these are the points which we have discussed. In case of unsecured bonds, there is a overall claim. There is not a specific claim. So in today's lecture number 3, basically I have discussed learning outcome number D, and I will be taking one more lecture, lecture number 4, for this learning outcome D, because I have to discuss legal and regulatory framework considerations on the basis of credit enhancement. And the last concept is tax considerations. What are the tax considerations? Whether it will be treated as a revenue income, whether it will be a capital gain. That part we will be discussing in lecture number 4. A very small lecture. Hope you have enjoyed this. Be happy, be jolly, be cheerful. Be happy.